Hey YouTube, how's it going? Kevin Cleary here with a knife video for you. And today I want to talk about blade steel. We're going to do my top 5 picks, my top 5 favorite blade steels. But before we get to those, I want to qualify this whole video and maybe go on a little bit of a rant here. But before I do that, I want to ask you guys to comment down below with some of your favorite steels. Now you may want to hold off. I'm going to mention quite a few by way of honorable mention after I mention my top 5. But so that'll be the fun discussion we're going to have. But before I get into all that, let me say this. When we talk about blade steels, we need to every once in a while be reminded that for probably 95% of us, we do not need the high performance offered by even the moderately good steels, even the 154 CMs, VG10s of the world. Those are going to outperform our requirements for, as I say, 95% of people, right? Most of us would be fine with surgical steel because we're only going to use our knife, 1 or 2 times a day, and that's going to be to open a package. And then, at the end of the day when we go home, you got a sharpener there. You can touch it up a little bit or even just hone it, okay? So that's the thing I want to kind of get out there at the beginning and just point out that, there's a little snobbery that can go on here where we feel like we just have to have the very best steel. And sometimes I have to ask myself for what, right? And as a reviewer, sometimes I have to, I always comment on the steel, but oftentimes I have to say to myself, wait a second, Kevin, maybe you don't like that particular steel, but really, is it going to do the job that it needs to do? And the reality is most of the time, yeah, for probably, as I say, 95% of people, that steel is going to be fine, even if it is not very well hardened. And even if it doesn't hold an edge as well as I'd like, it probably doesn't need to for most people. Okay, so having said all of that, let's go ahead and get into the video. And let me say this, I want to start out with some more common steels to point out that you don't need to be spending tons and tons of money to get a good steel with good performance. And I started this list going from more common to more rare or more higher end. But I want to say that at this point, some of the steels that used to be pretty special are not that special anymore. They're kind of everywhere. S35VN is a great example. It seems like every knife that comes out has S35VN, which is great for the knife community. That's awesome that so many knives have good steel. But it just means that now, when you have that steel, it's not quite as special as maybe it once was. So let's go ahead and get started with the first steel on my list, and that is, there it is, 14C28N. 14C28N. This steel used to be exclusive to Kershaw. There still are some Kershaws that have it. I believe you get it on the Skyline, the Knockout. By the way, the Knockout is a great, great knife. And they have 14C28N steel. Real steel knives often have 14C28N. Rake knives that I've been doing some reviews on recently, they have 14C28N, and it is a great, great steel. Absolutely blows, the Chinese alphabet steels out of the water, at least in my experience. It's very stainless, it's very durable, edge retention is great, sharpens up reasonably well. So the first steel on my list is 14C28N, and that's kind of in the budget category, even though I know some of the knives that have it are not exactly budget knives. But I just want to point out that this is a widely available steel and is really, really good. Okay, so 14C28N is first on my list of favorite steels. Next up is a steel that is very, very popular and is found on knives that are fairly budget friendly, like this Rat Model 1. This is the D2 version of the Rat 1. What else have I got in D2? I think, let me check. Yeah, the Real Steel Bushcraft 2 is in D2 steel as well. And I've got a couple of others. Where have I put them? Anyway, doesn't matter. But D2 steel is not stainless, although it's not bad. Okay, it will rust on you if you're not careful, but you almost have to misuse it or be negligent to get it to rust badly. I've had tons of D2 steel knives. It's always performed extremely well for me. Now there is the qualification that it depends on heat treat a little, and Brose Blades probably does one of the best jobs on it. And that tells you something when you're using D2 steel on blades that are as expensive as the ones coming from Brose Blades. I wouldn't be surprised if in the next few years we see him upgrade a little, but the reality is D2 steel is a great performing steel. It takes an edge really well. It holds that edge like crazy. And one of the things that I kind of look for, although I'll break this rule a little bit, it's really great to get a steel that feels a little bit magic. And what I mean by magic is generally there's a relationship between how easy a knife is to sharpen and how long it's going to hold that edge. So a knife that's really easy to sharpen generally goes dull faster. A knife that's really hard to sharpen, that's because the steel is very hard, tends to hold that edge a little longer. D2 though seems to really be easier to sharpen than it should be based on how long it holds an edge. And that's one of the things that that are really appreciable about the steel. By the way, while we're talking about this, CTS XHP that Cold Steel is using, that's why I had the Recon 1 here. This is very chemically and really very, in its properties, very similar to D2, except for it's more stainless. So that's why people love it so much, myself included, even though it's not on my top 5 list, it's really more of an honorable mention. So let's get these out of the way and move on to the next steel on the list. Now, I'm going to have to use one knife for both of these. This is the Para 2, great knife. This one happens to be the Brown G10 with S35VN. I'm going to hold off on the S35VN steel though and use this to stand in for the M4 Para 2 that came out this year. Great steel. Of course, the Para 2 is a great knife, but M4 is the next one on my list. I have had such amazing performance from the M4 knives that I've had that I just had to put it up there and talk about it a little bit. It's really hard. It is a little tougher to sharpen than some of the others, but you rarely have to do it. I've had a couple of M4 knives that are now gone. They've moved on to other people who are enjoying them, but I've had some that I've literally never had to sharpen, and I've used them tons, and just a little bit of light stropping and they're right back to stupidly razor sharp. M4, in my experience, just holds an edge like crazy, and for that reason, it's on my list, along with, and that's the second non-stainless steel, along with the D2. Just a great performing steel, and it's available in a bunch of different knives. Some of the standouts would be, of course, the M4 Para, the Benchmade Contigo. There's a Benchmade Striker that's a special edition in M4. Anyway, I'm not going to think of any more right off the top of my head, but that's a steel that I do really like and wanted to mention. Next up, we'll get to number 4, S35VN. Now, this is a progression in steel technology from S30V. Both of those, S30V and S35VN, were specifically designed for cutlery and were designed with a little bit of help, a little bit of consultation from Chris Reeve, which is pretty cool. S35VN is a steel that it comes back to that special property that I talked about that almost makes a steel feel magic. S35VN is, for how well it holds its edge, it's fairly easy to sharpen. Now, I'm not saying it's super duper easy to sharpen and it's just going to be like your Tenacious, which is, in HCR 13, but it's for how well it performs, it is easy to deal with, and that is what we appreciate about it. Now, what's kind of weird about this steel, S35VN, is that at one point, even just a couple of years ago, it was still a pretty kind of special premium steel. You're like, hey, this is a pretty nice steel. Now, it seems like everybody and their dog uses S35VN in their knives, which is, again, great for the industry. Really exciting stuff, but it does make it a little less special. Now, while we're talking about this steel, let's bring in S30V. This is sort of the previous generation to S35VN, and S30V is still a great steel. In some ways, I prefer it to S35. Sometimes S35VN can feel a little soft to me. Of course, that depends on the heat treat. S30V, for me, is a great, I just find that it's a little bit harder, and some people have complained that it's a little chippy. I am pretty careful with my knives. I don't do a lot of prying and stuff like that with them. So for me, it performs very well. And because of that, yes, it's a little harder to sharpen than S35VN, but I find it'll hold that very razor sharp edge just a teeny bit longer. And again, that depends on heat treat. But number 4 is going to be S35VN, just because it is one of those steels that really has that feeling of, man, this is easy to sharpen, and yet it still holds an edge like crazy. By the way, this para has the best action I've seen on a para too. That's why I've had 5 or 6 of them, and this is the one that sticks around. Next up is going to be a number of steels, and let's see if I can get, oh, wrong side of the blade. There it is. M390. Now, M390 is definitely about the most well-known and most popular of the sort of modern super steels. It's chemically the same as 20CV and CTS 204P, so I'm going to kind of group those all together. These steels are absolutely phenomenal, okay? They hold an edge extremely well. They're extremely wear resistant. You know, you can put a lot of use on a knife that's in M390, and that use just does not show on the blade. It's just a really tough steel. And in addition to that, you get a blade that holds an edge like crazy. Again, oftentimes with my M390 blades, you rarely get a chance to sharpen them because they just never need it, especially if you're like me and you kind of regularly maintain your edge with a bit of stropping and a little honing from time to time. So M390 is going to be the last one mentioned, and I didn't really, you know, as I said, I kind of went in order from more budget friendly and a little more common to, you know, something you'll find on some more expensive knives. Although there are a number of knives that are kind of breaking the mold. There's some M390 knives out there that are really, really affordable, or maybe not really, really affordable, but are reasonably affordable, like the exclusives from knifeworks.com. There's the Contigo and the 710 and the 940. Those are pretty budget-friendly knives, or pretty reasonably priced knives that have M390. Recently I reviewed the Viper Fortis. It has M390 and it's not that bad. But then of course there are knives like this that are going to be, you know, in the hundreds of dollars, and you're going to find M390 quite frequently on knives in that price range. Now, that does not cover even anything close to the number of good steels that are out there. You know, we haven't covered carbon steels, 1095 being one of the great ones that you'll often find in survival knives. 440C, if it's well heat treated, can perform really, really well. It's an older steel, but there was a time when, you know, if we were making this video, whatever, 10 years ago or something, 440C would have been really high on the list. It was one of those great performing steels, and as technology has advanced, that's kind of changed. Of course, we have to mention ZDP 189, which of course Rockstead uses, and you know, makes these blades that are crazy hard, like 67 Rockwell, which doesn't even seem in the realm of possibility. I can't even imagine trying to sharpen it or work with it. Someday maybe I'll get my hands on a Rockstead. There's also S110V, which is a great steel, S90V, which is a little harder, sort of in that ZDP 189 type of category, CTS XHP, which we've already mentioned, 3V and 4V, S30V, CPM 154, again, a great steel. My DOC is in CPM 154. So there are lots more knives that we could, or lots more steels that we could mention that are going to perform really, really well. And here's where I want some help from the community. Let's hear what you guys have to offer in the comments down below. Hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it's helpful to you. And what I'd like to see in the comments, just to help people out, is if you're looking for a knife with good steel, go ahead and mention. So if you say, this is my favorite steel, go ahead and mention what knife you have with that steel, so that someone who's watching this and would like some direction in terms of knives they might want to try out can look down in the comments and see some good examples of nice knives with good steel. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and we will talk to you soon.